Hello and welcome to Career Talk. I'm Lee Hopwood, CEO at the CCMA and host of this live show where I chat with contact centre professionals about their career journeys so far. And why do we do this? Well, we want to help inspire those that are working in the industry, but also we want to inspire those that are thinking about working in the industry. And is there a career path that you can go on? And oh my goodness, there is. And hopefully, if you've watched any career journeys before, career talks before, you'll know that there are loads of opportunities. And today, I am delighted to be joined by Ray Biggs, who is head of customer care at John Lewis and Waitrose. Welcome, Ray.
Hi, Lee. How are you?
I am good, thank you. I am good. Now, I can't wait to chat to you about your career to date, because I know you've got a big move coming up. But when I say that you have got a lot of contact centre experience, I mean that in the nicest way, because you have got an experience or a pathway that stretches all sorts of different brilliant brands, including the likes of Sainsbury's, Home Retail Group, Argos, Npower, the AA, or you got to John Lewis and Waitrose. And I know that today is your last day at John Lewis before you take that big step, which we will talk about in a minute. But I want to go back to where it started, because I believe that you did a degree in theatre arts. Is that right? Is that a prerequisite for being in the contact centre?
I mean, to be honest, it worked against me. I did a BA Honours in theatre. So I trained as a professional actor, and it became quite evident that I wasn't really that good. So I had to get a proper job, and I didn't really know what it was that I wanted to do, in truth, because you kind of trying to be an actor and you think you're going to be a Hollywood superstar, and the reality kicks in that you're really not going to be. Surprising for everyone. I know.
But were you in anything? Were you in any ads? Did you do theatre? Were you in theatre shows and stuff?
Yeah, so it was classical theatre stuff that we did. But I was in Memphis Belle. So Memphis Belle was shot near where I grew up in Grimsby. And it was filmed over a summer, about 12 weeks. And I was an extra. And I spent literally 8 weeks on that film set. And was really, really excited. And there was some shoots where I was kind of quite close to some of the action that was going on. And when they premiered the film, I was thinking, this is it. Somebody's going to spot that handsome man in the background and think he's got some skills. I'm nowhere in the film. I'm in nothing. I'm nowhere near it. And that is probably sums up my acting career. So I kind of started looking for work. But actually, back then, I'd have an interview and they go, oh, so you trained as an actor? And I go, oh, yeah, I did. And they go, well, how do you know that you're not lying to us? You're like, what? I'm applying to work in a petrol station as a cashier. Are you kidding me? But actually, do you know what? There is some kind of linkage here, because kind of acting really is about communicating and talking to people. And, I think people kind of forget that that's actually what contact centre is about, right? It's about talking to people and having conversations and interacting and reacting. So there is a bit of linkage in there. I think it has, look, it gave me some confidence, clearly. I'm not afraid of standing up and talking to people. So, yeah, a bit of a career change, but I think it has been foundationary, shall we say.
Interesting. So classical theatre. So I don't want to labour on it, because I do want to find out what your next step was. But you must have played a few parts in your time.
So yeah, so I mean, in terms of classics, comedy of errors. So this will be hilarious, right? If there are any of my old university mates watching, they'll be like, "You fool." I was in Comedy of Errors, and the character I played has one of the longest Shakespearean soliloquies written. Right, it's epic. And I was really poor at learning lines, and it was just a nightmare. I was virtually making stuff up. But yeah, Comedy of Errors, Macbeth, Midsummer Night's Dream, King Henry IV, Henry V, all that sort of stuff.
Wow.
Yeah. It was good fun. I'm occasionally useful in a pub quiz.
I was going to say, there's a lot of knowledge in Shakespeare, a lot of knowledge. So you decided that actually that might not be your career.
Yeah.
Petrol station?
Yeah, so literally I took a job at a petrol station because I kind of grew up in Grimsby, and we were kind of from a very early age had a good work ethic. You know, mum and dad were both crafters. So but clearly working in a petrol station, Alderley Edge actually, serving David Beckham. There you go, another claim to fame. I started looking for work, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I was lucky enough, my brother was a senior executive in a business, and he got me some time with his HR team. So look, he's got university, he's got a drama degree, doesn't really know what he's going to do. And they said, well, look, with the kind of skills that you've got, kind of, you know, customer service, management, leadership, that's probably the space to go. And so as a result, I started applying for contact center jobs. And I started my career at the AA, which is Automobile Association, not Alcoholics Anonymous. But I literally started on the phones, right? And I really liked it. You were working with a team of people. You know, we trained together. We're on the same team. The environment was good fun. You know, I remember we used to have, like, you know, incentive programs and dress-up days and all that sort of stuff, right? I really quite liked it, you know, and I built some good friends there. And that was kind of where it started. And I was probably on the phones for about maybe 18 months, something like that. And you know, I was young. I wanted to get married, wanted to get a house, and do all of those kind of things. So you know, a team manager role came up, and I applied for it. And I was probably more surprised than anyone that I actually got it. But I think it's quite interesting. It was actually Anne-Marie Stagg who gave me my first break. So she was, way back then, she was contact center manager at the AA, and she gave me my first break. I think, well, if you asked her now, you know, she took a chance on me because I was wet behind the ears, 25 years old, bit cocky. I know it's a surprise for everyone. But I think it taught me a lot, actually. And you know, I'd like to think, well, I know there are a number of individuals over my career that I've subsequently, because of my experience, I've gone, you know what, somebody took a chance on me and it worked out brilliantly. I think I'm gonna take a chance on you. So yeah, so the AA, that's where I kind of cut my teeth. I was on the phones. I knew all the tricks, you know, hitting hold 3 times puts you to the back of the queue, so you have to take the call. Oh, shouldn't say that on here. But yeah, all that stuff, you know, I kind of did all of it and experienced it. And
was that when, were you in a sales environment? Were you, because I can imagine
service.
that you're
So,
all service.
Yeah, so I know I don't look old enough, right? This was before mobile phones, okay?
Yeah.
And this, you know, one of the jobs that we had to do was AA members would call up, and they would ask for us to send. They would say, "I'm travelling to Bristol to see my grandson at the weekend. I live in Wrexham. Can you send me a route plan?" And we would literally go off to a dumb terminal computer. We'd key in, we'd print off a route map, stuff it in an envelope, and post it out. And that was kind of part of the job that we used to do. Or we would sometimes have AA members would ring up, you know, from the AA boxes and ask for directions. They'd be like, "I'm on the A1, I'm trying to get to Chiswick. Can you give me directions?" And, you know, part of our training was learning how to read a map and stuff like that. This is like literally 1995, 96, something like that. Apple didn't exist. Apple wasn't around. So yeah, it was service. There was some soft sales in there. So we used to help members book car travel, so like ferry spaces, and we try and upsell travel insurance and stuff like that. But it wasn't kind of the hard selling environment. It was very much, it was true sales through service, actually. AA were there quite a while before everybody else, I think.
And when you went into the team leader role, did you get training? Did you get support, or were you just thrown into that role and Anne-Marie coached you, no doubt? But yeah. Did you have any formal training? And you know, this is
there was a bit, but nothing like you have now. So you know, I think there was a little bit of you know, absence management training, because way back then, you know, mental health and well-being didn't exist. I mean, by the way, clearly it did, but it just wasn't recognised in the same way. You know, and I look back actually to the team that I had now, and I can almost see all 12 of them sat on that bank of desks. And I kind of think, you know, if I had some of the tools that are available now to team leaders back then, what a much better job that I did. But no, you were kind of much more on your own initiative, but the kind of the relationships with things like HR departments were all very different then. So I think, you know, most organizations have stripped all of that back, but way back then, absence management sat more with personnel than it would do with a line manager. A lot of the activity I did was around kind of stats and performance management, and kind of looking back. Without performance management tools, I was kind of creating them and looking at trends and plotting data and figuring out how to work Excel and those kind of things. But what I kind of learned early on was kind of engaging with the team, just kind of being there with the team, and just how much you learn by being on the floor and being in amongst it, and what you listen and what you pick up on. But I mean, they must have thought I was mental. There was a couple of ladies who were, you know, it's fair to say, were fairly senior in years and have been there, you know, 30 odd years. I've been there 2 years, been promoted as a team manager. They probably had grandchildren older than me, and you know, having to build relationships, you know, there, along with some of the people that I trained with and come through, and now suddenly I'm managing my mates, and you know, that's always a tricky situation. Sorry?
It's a hard step. One, being promoted from in amongst your peer group, but and therefore managing your mates, but also managing people that are older than you, because you're not quite sure how they're going to take it.
No.
It's hard.
No, it really tough, and not faint-hearted either.
What advice would you give anyone that's going through that right now?
Listen more than you talk, for sure, in that situation. And I think the good thing now is, I think we are much more comfortable with the notion of recognizing that, you know, what you see of an individual is probably 2% of what's actually going on in their lives, and therefore, you know, just being mindful of that and trying to work out, you know, if behaviors aren't what you would expect them to be, what may or may not be going on elsewhere that's impacting. So that kind of rounded, you know, talk about pastoral care, right? It's like, that's an odd old phrase to use, but I think leadership now, even at team management level, and if I look at, you know, the brilliant team managers that I've got in John Lewis, you know, a lot of their time now is more in that space. So yeah, looking back, you learn a lot from those transitions, and I think the other thing is, it's all right to get some stuff wrong, right? If you're doing it with the very best intent and you get it wrong, then, you know, the answer is, well, I was trying to do the right thing. And as long as you're always trying to do the right thing, you're never going to go that far. So, you know, I think you do worry that everything's got to be really perfect, but and use the team. You know, those two ladies, I shouldn't name them really, and I won't. But you know, they equally had buckets of experience, you know, buckets of knowledge that if you can just tap into, it's brilliant. It's worth a fortune.
Love that. And after the AA, you then got your first foray into working at an outsourcer.
Yeah. I mean, it was, you know, look, I was lucky. I was invited across to Vertex, who are an outsourcer. They were part of United Utilities. Well, actually, I went across to join United Utilities, and again, that was just like, that was bonkers. So this was the point at which all of the local area authorities were consolidating into big contact center operations. So where you'd have the water board for the Warrington postcode and the Liverpool, they all came together to be this big, humongous thing. And as a result, you brought, you know, the Warrington people and the Liverpool people and the Widnes people all together in the same place. And if anybody knows the Northwest, you can imagine what kind of a cooking pot that was. So I was there initially, and then United Utilities created an outsource called Vertex. So I got into outsourcing, which is kind of interesting given where I'm going, because my career's kind of almost gone full circle now. But that was quite a pivotal moment, I think. For my first team manager appointment was a big deal on a whole number of this just exposed me to a whole load of stuff. So I met Brad Cleveland for the first time. So you know Brad, and it's interesting. I have got somewhere, I just can't flip him find it. His Call Centre on Fast Forward book, and way back then it was only about this big. And if you read it now, it's about that big, right? But I don't know, there was something that just really switched me on in that environment to contact centers and how they work, and the mechanics and the planning and the performance management and the people leadership, but then the customer piece as well. And we were lucky. I worked on a project called Sports Direct. Sports Direct. So part of Littlewoods. Littlewoods used to have the pools. National Lottery came in. Nobody bought the pools. I remember as a kid, the pools man coming round to the house, right? So Littlewoods were looking to try a number of ways in which they could reinvent themselves. So they created a telephone betting operation. So again, almost pre-internet. So we had an operation that took telephone bets, and we had a system. But if the system went down, we had pads in triplicate, and you literally had people writing out bets. It was the maddest thing in the world. But that kind of environment was just so highly charged and highly energized, because you've got all the horse racing going on, you've got big football matches, all those kind of things, and it was massive. You think about Grand National Day, we'd have like 4,000 people taking bets. It was just like an adrenaline rush, and I learned so much, because then I was also client facing. So I had Littlewoods, the client, that I was kind of running the operation, and it kind of pushed and pulled me in a whole load of ways that I'd never been tested before. And I was dead lucky. So, sure, Anne-Marie was super. And again, I think, to be fair, took another chance on me. She must have been bonkers. But really empowered me to get stuff done. And I think that's something that's always stayed with me. And I'd kind of hope if you talk to any of the teams that I've had the pleasure of working with, that's one thing that is one of my trademarks. I want people to be empowered, because I was empowered and I did a brilliant job. And therefore, most people, when they're empowered, do.
Yeah, and do you know what? It's really interesting listening to you talk about the level of detail, the empowerment you've had to be able to make a difference, make a change, do things differently, do things better. I'm sure test and learn along the way. What I hear senior folk talk about now is in across all sectors, contact centres and other sectors, is once you're in the senior position, that level of detail that you obviously know when you're in that, a team leader, customer services manager level. Have you still got that level of detail, or do you now have a team around you that has the detail and you're able to look at it more strategically?
Both. So, yeah, and I think one of the things that I've learned, and certainly in John Lewis, I think I really learned to kind of step back a bit and be more strategic. But I in terms of kind of superhero skills, I don't have many, but being able to drop into that detail if needed, I can do it, because I've done it and I lived and breathed it, and I learned from some brilliant people. There were some brilliant analysts when I was at the AA that I just learned loads from. There was some brilliant resource planners at Vertex that I learned loads. I feel like I kind of creamed off the best wherever I went, and took that knowledge with me. So yeah, I consider it a bit of a superhero strength, that if I need to, I can. But what it allows me to do, it kind of a bit of stuff, because I'm very comfortable and confident with it, I'm very happy to step away from it and let the team go off and do it. And I think, if you were to talk to my John Lewis team, they'd say, yeah, Ray, but sometimes you just need to leave us alone. And that's probably not. I think I've got better at that over the 6 years that I've been there. We've got it. You don't need to ask us that question. Okay, fine.
and it's really interesting when I look at your career once you left Vertex, and at Vertex you're a customer services manager. You then, on the face of it, and this is what I just want to delve into a little bit differently, is on the face of it, it looks like you're a customer service manager for several years across different brands. But I'm sure I don't know you really well, but I know you well enough to know that you'll be looking for something different, and constantly looking to challenge yourself. What was different in those different jobs that you did?
For me, I wanted to get on, and I think I wasn't afraid to take risks and take change. I think, and I'm not. My way isn't necessarily the right way. So some people will stay with an organisation and work hard with an organisation to move up the climbing frame. John Lewis is a great example of that. You'll see people that have been there 25 years, right, and have navigated their way through, and that's cool. For me, I kind of I wanted another fix. I've done this now. What's the next new thing? And if I can't get a new thing, I'm not staying here and stagnating. And interestingly, when we get to talk about Argos, that's probably what happened, because I stayed there too long. But yeah, I was looking for the next thing, and yeah, it was absolutely about money, and it was about job role and those kind of things. But if you look at my career, I went from Vertex to O2. BT Cellnet, again, showing my age, right? O2 didn't exist then. And then I went from there to the Caldwell Group, and that was a pretty poor move by me. But at the time, I was chasing a big title and a company car, right? And learn some pretty tough lessons pretty quickly on the the emperor's new clothes of some of that sort of stuff, right? Because actually, what I've learned, I think it's really important to understand what you want from a role, what you like and what you enjoy. It's equally important to know what you don't like and what you won't enjoy. And it's absolutely okay. I think people kind of sometimes are a bit afraid. They go, well, you've got to be able to adapt to anything. No, you haven't. You absolutely haven't. You don't have to at all. Know what you like, know what you enjoy, because you spend that much time at work. If you're unhappy in work, and I have been for a small period of my career, it's devastating. It's devastating. It takes over. So I learned a really interesting lesson there. But yeah, I kind of sat at a level for a while where broadly it was the same role, but in different organizations. But you get slightly different flavors, and the responsibility either widens or it deepens. But you've got to learn from all of those things. And sometimes you don't even know what you've learned at the time. I look back now, and I went from the Caldwell Group to Empower. And I remember this at the time. I went to the headhunters that put me in there, and I said, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. And they said, well, to be honest, Ray, we've got some contracting work. I had a young family, twins, mortgage, massive risk. And I ended up contracting for 2 years. And it was one of the highlights of my career, because I worked for a guy who unfortunately is no longer with us, passed away. But I learned so much from him in 2 years.
What did you learn from him?
It was his ability to not have to be the expert in the room. So I because of the way in which my career had grown up, I'd always been the expert. And if you weren't the expert, then that was going to be a problem. And what I learned from John was, no, actually, the magic here is bringing the experts into the room, and you just orchestrate, and you help the experts talk to each other, and you bring them together. And it's more of a facilitation than a lead, which is kind of quite an interest. For me, was like, what we're talking about. But also he was so very, very good with everyone in the organization. He would take the same amount of time walking through the office, talking to the guys on the phones, talking to the cleaners, as he would talking to the exec and the board. And there's been other leaders in my career that have done that as well. Of course they have, but he did it. He did it in such a way, it was just breathtaking to watch. And this guy was just so unassuming. He could choose to be invisible in a room if he wanted to be. I'm still working on that because I'm not very good at it. But he could absolutely be invisible in a room, right? Very deliberately so. Just fade in the background and just let it all happen. But he taught me some hard stuff as well, around, priorities and choices and conscious decision making. So you consciously say yes to lots of things. Yes, I will do this. Yes, I will do that. You also need to consciously say, no, I am not going to do that. No, what you don't do is leave it as well, I might get to it if I get round to it. It's a soft, you're either going to do it or you're not. And if you're not going to do it, then you're not going to do it. And that's okay. You've made a conscious decision. So some of that around, and what that did for me was kind of stop me buzzing around like a moth around a bright light, and kind of taught me just to take a bit of a step back and breathe. So the real kind of maturing
Mm.
I think, in my career.
That's fascinating, and you touched on it earlier, that your time at Argos, where I think you went Empower and then
Yeah.
on to Argos.
Yeah.
Tell us about that. Why Argos, and what did you get from that time?
I mean, interestingly, right? So all the stuff we're talking about is pre-retail, and I've spent most of my career in retail. But I think all of that early part was just so foundational. It was where some of the values were really kind of locked down. And even now, sometimes I look back to some of those things. Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, look, Argos was brilliant. It was an absolute roller coaster. I was there, I think, for 8.5 years. I think in hindsight, I should have probably left at about 6 years, because towards the end, I knew everyone and I knew everything, and I barely had to think. And equally, I'd also become that kind of intrinsic to the organization. It was like, well, if Ray goes, then the whole business collapses. What a surprise it didn't when I left. That was a shock to me more than anybody else. But that was, that was where I really started to cut my teeth in terms of shifting from an operational role, core operational role, to a more strategic role. And that's where I started to get involved in outsourcing from the other side of the fence. So actually, way back with Big Cogent, as they were then in John's previous guys, and small world stuff. I remember referencing for Big Cogent Sainsbury's and John Lewis, who I then subsequently both went on to work for, but small world. But yeah, I grew up quite a bit, man and boy, from Argos. And that's where I kind of started to find this sweet spot around. I really started to, I was going to say, grow out of the operational kind of adrenaline stuff that I've been doing for so long, and the firefighting, and actually kind of going, you probably shouldn't be firefighting. How strategically do you get to a place where you're not having to do as much firefighting? And that was really what my Argos journey was like, and really starting to work with sort of senior stakeholders in a business and create a strategy and build a strategy. And again, there was some great brains in that business that was able to lean on and learn from. And there's a kind of there's a bit of alumni of some of us now that were all kind of grew up together in Argos, but have now kind of scattergunned and are all in kind of I guess pretty senior positions in other organizations now, which is probably a testament to the sort of what you learn. But this was a time when retail online was going bonkers, double-digit growth year on year, all that sort of stuff, right? It was crazy times, and then we suddenly hit the crash of 2007 or whenever it was, and for the first time in my life, I'm facing into restructures, reorganizations, redundancies. People that I've worked really closely with, people that I've seen, people that I've taken chances on, that I know I'm now going to have a conversation with and say, actually, we've got to a difficult place, and there's consequences of all of that. So that, the first time you ever do those kind of things, I think, is always a bit of a marker in your career, because it's the tough stuff, and it's the really hard stuff that you have to do, as well as the the great growth and the winning awards and all of that. That was.
And have you had to do a lot of that tough stuff, making people redundant? I appreciate that there may be conversations that are around performance that need to be had, but that stuff that's out of your control, where you're having to and
it's it's the worst part of the job, right? It's the worst part of the job, because what I think we do as leaders is, we build relationships. You're not friends with everybody, but you build relationships, you spend lots of time with people. And if you're then the person that's going to have to stand there and say, actually, it isn't anything, it's nothing that if it's a performance management, it's kind of different, right? The rules are different, the game's different. When you get into these kind of restructures and reorganizations, it's really hard. It's really hard. And I think as leaders, we often sacrifice ourselves, because we're doing it right. We're not being made redundant. We're having those conversations, and we're managing that process through, and you feel guilty about it, and therefore you feel that I'm really lucky, and I shouldn't feel the emotional burden of it, but you do. And there's a really important thing about how leaders look after themselves. Make sure they've got the right support around them as they take people through that process, because robots. It's the worst part of the job. And I've been in retail for 20 years now, and it's tougher and tougher and tougher. And I've probably had to do more of that stuff in the last 10 years than I did in the first 10 years. That's one of the reasons why I'm kind of quite excited about the new move. But hopefully that it's more of a growth situation. But yeah, it's tough, but equally it's also part of the job.
Yeah. And, so you've done 20 years in retail. How have those opportunities come about? And I'm aware that as you mentioned earlier, Sainsbury's and then into John Lewis. How have those opportunities come about? Have people gone looking for you, or have you decided there's a change needed?
Yeah, I've been very lucky in that people have been looking for me. But you've got to be in a position where you want to take those opportunities. And by the way, I've gone for plenty that I haven't got. I mean, I remember, and I've always done this. So kind of going back, I remember when I was at the AA and I'd been promoted to a team manager, and there was a job. I'd only been a team manager a couple of months, and there was a job advertised, and it was a call center manager for Eurocamp. Remember that?
I do.
And I thought, oh, I'll have a go at that. And I remember, and I couldn't drive at the time, and I'd got a train and a bus, and I turned up at the Eurocamp head office in Knutsford, and I was there early. I was the first candidate, and it was going to be one of these group workshop things, right, that they used to do back in the day. And I was there first, suited, booted, wet behind the ears. And I literally saw everybody turn up in like big flash company cars and all that sort of stuff. I'm thinking, I think I might be out my league a little bit here. And it was it was horrific. But you learn a lot from that sort of stuff, and you kind of have to put yourself out there, and you put yourself. But each time I went for an interview and didn't get it, I always learned something, and therefore eventually.
But you know what? And that's so true. I remember going for a job years and years ago. It was a marketing manager role, and it was for I'll call them a museum for want of a better word, but it was for a museum of sorts. And I remember going to it. I got through the first phase, got into the second stage, and I had to do a presentation. I had loads of fun with this presentation because of the museum as it was. And I didn't get the job. And the advice I was given was that I wasn't serious enough. And I learned so much just from that piece of advice. I learned so much. And I'm sure you've been through the same, when you go for the jobs and you don't get them, you learn so much if you're able to get some advice and feedback back.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the other thing is, it's all right to fail.
Yeah.
Right. It's okay to go for an interview and not get it. That doesn't mean you're never going to get a job. It just means that you weren't right, or they weren't right for you. And I guess I'm a big believer in fate. I think if something's meant to happen, it will happen. And there's certainly one role in my career I wish I'd never ever taken, but I learned so much of how not to do things in that role.
Yes.
That it really, 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 really helped. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not uncommon to have a blip in a career, but that blip, you're right, you learn so much from it. So it's almost okay. Don't let it get you down. Learn from it, and it'll help you become stronger. So I'm really conscious of the fact that this is your last day at John Lewis. You've had an amazing career at John Lewis, 7 years, 6 years, 7 years, 7 years.
6.5, yeah, nearly 7, rounds up to 7.
Rounds up to 7. First of all, John Lewis, what have been your biggest, proudest moments at John Lewis?
Blimey. I mean, look, for a kid in retail, John Lewis is like, it's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, right? The only person I didn't meet was Willy Wonka. It's an incredible business. And by the way, that doesn't mean it gets everything right by any stretch. But it is a very special and very unique business. I think most proud of. I think it's absolutely the work that the teams. I always feel a bit of a fraud with this, right? Because I didn't actually do that much other than create an environment and empower some people. You know, the actual hard yards and the real thinking was done by the team. So I always feel like I have to kind of apologise, but I'm really proud of what the team have done around mental health and well-being, and the fact that, you know, we were ahead of that curve. So we were looking at that before the pandemic. You know, so, you know, Joe Garland, you know, Asda now, Joe, you know, used to be part of the team, and Joe was on that before anybody else, and that put us in really good in a really good situation. That when the pandemic came, we were just able to accelerate our plans, and how we were able to support the teams through kind of home working, through the pandemic, and now beyond. Because it's equally as important now. We're in such a challenging place, retail, and there's so much uncertainty. You know, the well-being of our partners is even more important than it was in a pandemic, quite frankly. And what the teams have done, and, you know, yes, we've won awards. It's not about the awards, of course, it's about the awards. But the recognition that we've got from, you know, our customer-facing teams is the stuff that really matters, and some of the feedback that we get from them. And by the way, we've got loads more work to do. Loads more work to do on that. And then the D&I stuff, right? I mean, I was pretty ignorant really of the lack of inclusivity, and almost embarrassingly not aware of what was going on in front of my face, because you know, a privileged, fat, middle-aged white bloke, right? That's broadly what you've got here. I can't see through the eyes of you know, our black partners, our Muslim partners, our gay partners, you know. And there was a real learning curve, and I've always considered myself to be really diverse, and the reality was I probably wasn't, actually. I mean, flipping heck, I'm certainly more diverse than some, but that journey that we've gone on, and how we've really helped to try and make a difference in that space, is stuff that I never considered as part of a role when I got made a team manager in 1997. But kind of making a difference to people's lives, and it's not just in the workplace. You know, we talk about educate and agitate, and that's exactly what we're doing, what we'll continue to do. And the team are already, you know, I'm out there, the team are already working on the next phase of that, around belonging, and so those things are, you know, are really special to me, just because of the scale difference that it's made to our people. And I'd like to think ultimately it will make to our customers too, right? But they're, you know, I had a conversation with some of the team yesterday. It's fourth-row bridge with those things. You don't do it and fix it, because it keeps changing and iterating, and that's the real test, is the resilience of consistency in chasing those two things down. How do you reinvent? How do you stop it being boring? You know, what else can you do? How do you bring it to life? You know, it'd be great to be in a situation where you don't need to worry about those things, because they're so deeply entrenched in our society that it's no longer a big deal. But I think we all recognise
we've got a long way to go before that's the situation.
Yeah,
and it's fascinating, because I know that you've won awards around the diversity piece. I know that you've been a big champion of the people agenda, and really supporting people, and I guess moving into a BPO environment, you get to do that, or back to a BPO environment, it's even more important. Go on, tell us about your next move.
I'm beyond excited. I mean, it is, you know, people will kind of go, why on earth are you leaving, you know, the Willy Wonka? And I think for me, the lesson that I learned at Argos, you know, I stayed at Argos too long. And I think I could have seen myself sit there, you know, for another 10 years in JL, and maybe called it a day. That might have been the way to go. And I kind of promised myself after Argos I'll never do that again. But equally, it's such a special place. You don't leave it for anything. I I wouldn't leave it for anything. And when I was fortunate enough to have the conversation with Ian, it was just a no-brainer. I mean,
so you're off to Ventrica.
Yeah, Ventrica. Sorry, yeah, Ventrica, Chief Operations Officer for Ventrica. So back into outsourcing, working with an amazing business. Some of you'll know that Dino had built up. Ian's in there now. I mean, the Ventrica team are brilliant. Ian's complemented that with a few others, myself included. There's big ambitions, but and I know Ian's been on one of these podcasts too. I've been around enough, and I've met enough people, and I've been in enough situations and been presented with enough opportunities to know when one's really good. And I think, look, this is by no means a slam dunk, but
it's going to be hard. It's going to be tough.
It's going to be really tough. I'm really quite scared. But look, you kind of touched on it, Lee, a little bit. It's been tough the last 20 years. Well, particularly the last 10 years in retail and restructures, and it's all around consolidation and constriction and squeezing out efficiencies and all those kind of things. To be joining a business that is looking to grow, I mean, why am I not going to take that opportunity? It's going to be really, really tough. I think it's going to test every little single thing that I've learned in the last 25 years, and I'm going to have to bring all of that in to leverage. And I'm aware there will be people looking on with big expectations, and there will be people looking for some meteoric failure. But there's something that feels really right. I've met all of the team. I've met, all the people involved with the business. The timing feels right. There's risk, of course there is, but I do think, and you talk to. I know most of the BPO guys that are out there, right? And I've always been a champion of them because I think they get a bad rap. These guys generally are brilliant at people, right? And I think the cutthroat and the crazy days of the early 90s or whatever, of course there are always some rogues out there, of course there are, but generally speaking the standards are incredibly high. They look after the people incredibly well. They're doing amazing things in geographies around the world, and so to be part of that, and it's a bit of a come on then, shows how good you are. Let's bring all that stuff with you, and let's see. And BPO is a people business, and I'm passionate about people, so surely there's got to be something in there, that some value that I can add. But it's back to basics as well. It's not a big massive blue chip corporate. I'm not going to have somebody running around doing my emails for me. It's all on me. I've already had that conversation with Ian. That was a shock. He didn't tell me that when he offered me the job. But yeah, it's going to be all hands on. I know which bit of the pitch he wants me to play, but we're the kind of team where we're going to have to cover each other's positions as we go. And I'm super excited to be working with Ian and Joe Passingham and the rest of the team. I
think it's going to be fascinating to watch the impact you have at Ventrica. It's obviously, the work that Ian's doing at Ventrica, I think, is fascinating anyway. And people are going to be watching. Of course they are. And you're right. It's okay. It's okay to succeed, and it's okay to not quite succeed.
We'll absolutely crash some stuff, because that's kind of what happens. And actually, do you know, if you don't, there's that thing, isn't there, where if you don't break it, you're not trying hard enough. I mean, clearly you want to be quite careful about that. But more broadly, it's really exciting to be part of that industry again. And there's some brilliant folk out there, right? The standards are pretty high.
Absolutely. And hey, I wish you all the best in your new role at Ventrica. And I know that they can't wait to have you on board in the next couple of weeks. But before you go, I've got some quick questions for you.
Okay.
I know you mentioned that you were classically trained in theatre, but what do you prefer? Musical theatre or pantomimes?
Oh, pantomime every day of the week.
Oh no, you don't.
No brainer. Oh yes, you do.
I'm glad you got that one. Pantomime. I love a good pantomime. Okay, having been at John Lewis and at Sainsbury's before then, branded products or own branded products?
Own brand, providing it is Waitrose or Sainsbury's. I wouldn't touch anybody else's.
Love that. Loyal to the end. And I have to say, I know you've said that you wanted to be an actor, but have you got a hidden talent?
I'm a pretty good cook. I'm a pretty good cook. Yeah, that's my kind of my recreation. As you can, I don't spend much time in the gym, and therefore I'm obviously spending my time doing something else, which is eating. But yeah, I love it. It's my relax. I love cooking. I love cooking for people. Love cooking for family. Yeah, I'm pretty good. I would say that I'm biased, but I'm pretty good.
I have to ask them before we sign off. What's the favourite thing you like to cook?
So I do a really, really mean Spanish chicken. Spanish with tomatoes, chorizo, peppers, patata bravas, garlic mushrooms, green beans with red pepper.
Very good.
Lee, I'll invite you around next time.
Oh, absolutely. Well, hey, Ray, it has been an absolute pleasure getting to know you that little bit better. It's fascinating career. I know there's a lot of love and respect for you out there, and we can't wait to see you succeed at Ventrica. It's going to be really, really good to see you. Thank you so much for joining me, Ray.
Hey, thank you, Lee. It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much.
No worries. And hey, if you want to listen to any more career talks, please do go on to our website, ccma.org.uk, and listen to loads of different stories. They're all just as fascinating. Thank you so much. Take care. See you soon.